The story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
This is the city. 4 million people. There's something for everybody. Houses to live in. Places to work. Places to relax. Churches to pray in. Most of them enjoy life and they try to hold on to it. A few of them have lost their grip. In my job, I get to know them all. I'm a cop. It was Monday, August 12th. We were working the day watch out of Juvenile Division. My partner's Frank Smith. The boss is Captain Stein. My name's Friday. We'd gotten a call that a 7-week-old baby had been abandoned in a bus terminal. There was no sign of the mother, no lead to her whereabouts. We had to find her. Are you the woman that reported the abandoned baby?
Yes, that's right.
Police officers, ma'am. My name's Friday. This is my partner, Frank Smith, Juvenile Division.
What's your name, ma'am?
Mrs. Taylor. I'm certainly glad you're here. I've been waiting around this depot for hours. I don't know what to do.
That's a good baby. Why don't you go to sleep now? Go on. Close your eyes and go to sleep.
Oh, thanks. A shame.
Yes, ma'am. The report we got didn't go into details. Some woman left the baby with you, is that it?
Yes, as soon as we got off the bus this morning. She said she'd only be gone a few minutes. It's been hours. I don't know what to do.
Did you know the woman, Ms. Lewis?
Her name's Dorothy Miller. She's from Arizona. Tucson. We got off the bus, and she asked me if I'd hold her baby while she went to get her luggage. She said she'd meet me right there by the information desk. I've been waiting ever since. She hasn't come back. I don't know what to think.
How well did you know this Dorothy Miller, ma'am?
Well, not too well, but she seemed like such a nice girl, friendly, very sociable. We sat together all the way in.
Mm-hmm. You got on the bus with her at Tucson, is that it?
Oh, no. I'm from Cincinnati. I got on a bus there and then went down to Dallas. Had a visit with an aunt of mine down there.
Oh, I see.
I got another bus in Dallas to come out here. Went along the southern route. Very nice. The same bus I came in on this morning. I'm out here to meet my husband, Army man. He's coming in on a transport from overseas. He's coming in tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say this Dorothy Miller boarded the bus at Tucson with the baby. She rode all the way into Los Angeles with you, is that right?
Yes, right into this depot. She sat in the seat next to mine. We struck up a conversation. Got to be quite good friends. Such a cute baby. I just can't imagine.
Now, how about her description, Ms. Lewis? Anything unusual there?
No, I wouldn't say so. A small girl, 5'3" or 4", I'd say, 110 or 15 pounds. Red hair, shoulder length, dark eyes, nice complexion, very pretty eyes.
About how old would you say?
20. That's what she told me anyway. She said she had a birthday in May. I remember we talked about that. She was born under the same sign I was, Taurus the Bull.
Mm-hmm. And in all the talk she had with the Miller girl, she never gave you any reason to think that anything was wrong with her. She didn't seem to be despondent or depressed about it.
Perfectly normal girl, as far as I could tell. I just can't get over it. I can't imagine her doing anything like this.
You checked around the depot, did you? You had her page?
I talked to everyone in the place. The porters, ticket clerks, information desk, traveler's aid. Not one of them could help. I tried everybody. Babe, it's all right. We'll find your mother. We'll find you. Wonderful. It's just adorable. It's a little boy. She said his name's Stephen.
Yes, ma'am.
Her own baby, so small and helpless. How could she go off and leave him?
Well, I guess she had a reason. It must have been important.
A 7-week-old baby, your own? What's more important than that?
Before we left the bus depot, Frank contacted the clerk at the depot information desk and left our card with him. If anyone came in to make inquiries about the abandoned child, he was to advise them to get in touch with us. 11:48 a.m. The woman the baby had been left with, Mrs. Marjorie Lewis, agreed to return to the office and give us a complete report on everything she knew about the case. As soon as we got back, we briefed Captain Stein on what had happened, and he assigned policewoman Betty Stone to come in and help out with the baby. A cursory examination seemed to indicate there was nothing abnormal about the baby, no apparent deformities. We checked the blanket and the baby's clothing, but we found no identifying marks of any use to us. Policewoman Stone made the baby comfortable for the time being, and then she began to check through the contents of the small valise which the baby's mother had left with Mrs. Lewis. It contained the usual assortment: baby oil, powder, dextrose, a few cans of milk, a couple of blankets, and a supply of diapers. Frank and I continued to interview Mrs. Lewis.
Is this the Miller woman's first baby, do you know, or did she happen to mention?
Yes, it's her first. That's what she told me anyway.
Did you talk about the baby's health at all? Was there any trouble there?
Well, she did say she had some trouble with the formula at first. It didn't seem to suit the baby. It wasn't anything serious, though. Matter of fact, that does worry me a little bit, Sergeant.
What's that?
The baby's formula. Mrs. Miller did say it had to be fixed a special way. Some special medicine she put in it, too. Are you sure the baby's going to get good care?
Yes, ma'am. No need to worry. He'll be moved to the general hospital. They'll look after him.
Frankly, I can't help but feel a little guilty about all this.
What do you mean, Mrs. Lewis?
I mean, turning the baby over to you. It'll probably be put in some kind of an orphan's home. I can't help but think that maybe the Miller girl picked me out. She had to give the baby away, and she wanted me to have him. Then I turn around and hand him over to the police. It does make me feel a little guilty. She probably expected more of me.
There's no need to feel like that, ma'am. It's not your responsibility.
I suppose not, but I just can't help feeling that way, running out on a little baby like that, leaving him alone.
You wouldn't be in a position to take care of him anyway, would you?
No, I suppose not. I'd have to talk to my husband first. He'll be in tomorrow from overseas. He'll be back to the same old life again, living in hotels. No, I guess it wouldn't work even if they'd let me adopt him. Gets me down sometimes. I've always liked children.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Lewis. We appreciate your cooperation, everything you've done here.
Not at all, Sergeant. I only wish I could be more help.
Would you mind telling us where you'll be stopping in town, ma'am? It's possible we might want to contact you again.
Well, I don't have any reservations. I was thinking of staying at a hotel close to downtown.
Well, there's a big convention going on in town now, Ms. Lewis. Most of the place is pretty crowded. We'd be glad to help you find hotel space if you like.
Oh, well, that's certainly very nice of you. Sergeant Friday, could I see you a minute, please?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. Yeah, Betty.
Well, for a policewoman, I'm not bad at checking diapers.
What do you mean?
Right here, the valise the mother left with Mrs. Lewis.
Did you come up with anything?
I didn't think so at first. I went over the valise, everything inside, nothing. Then I started putting the things back in the bag. I found this in the stack of diapers right there. Paid receipt for a hospital bill. Maternity one.
Santa Maria Hospital, Tucson, Arizona.
There's the patient's name right there at the top.
Dorothy Miller. 12:30 p.m. A local broadcast and an APB were gotten out on Dorothy Miller. Then we sent a communication to the Tucson Police Department laying out the story for them and asking them to check with the Santa Maria Hospital there for a possible lead on the missing mother. Meantime, the baby was removed to the general hospital. We found accommodations for Mrs. Lewis in a downtown hotel. We dropped her off there, and then we drove back to the bus depot on 6th Street. We tried to locate the driver of the bus on which the Miller woman and her baby had arrived that morning. We were told he was off duty and that he wouldn't report back in until 8 o'clock the following morning. We left our card along with a message for the driver asking him to contact us as soon as he returned. For the rest of the afternoon, Frank and I, along with 2 other men from Juvenile Division, checked with all the bus depot personnel, but we were unable to turn up any kind of a lead. After that, we started making the rounds of the hotels, bars, restaurants, and taxicab stands in the neighborhood. The same results, nothing. 7:55 a.m. the following morning, I reported back in for work.
Morning, Joe.
Oh, hi, Betty. Frank check in yet?
Yeah, I went out for a minute. Said he'd be right back.
What do you know? Anything new?
Communication for you from the Tucson PD. Kickback on that query you got off to them yesterday.
You see this?
Yeah, confirms the fact the woman had her baby in that hospital. Still not much help, though.
Yeah, I see. We checked out her last known address in Tucson. She moved. No forwarding address, no line on her friends or relatives.
Well, the day the baby was born seems to check out.
Yeah, June 24th. Makes the baby just about 7 weeks old. This part doesn't make much sense, though.
The Miller girl's description?
Yeah, Ms. Lewis said Dorothy Miller was small and dark. Long red hair, dark eyes. People at the hospital describe her as being fairly tall. Blue eyes, short brown hair, about 29 or 30 years old.
Mrs. Lewis said the Miller girl just turned 20, didn't she?
Yeah. Sure doesn't figure, does it?
A little too much to write off as coincidence. 2 Dorothy Millers having babies, same day, same hospital.
I just happened to think, this description of the Miller girl.
Uh-huh.
Fairly tall, short brown hair. Ms. Lewis has short brown hair, hasn't she?
Hi, Joe.
Morning, Frank.
You know that bus driver we wanted to talk to, the one that drove the bus that Dorothy Miller and the baby came in on yesterday?
Yeah.
Well, he came up to see us. He's in the next room. I've been talking to him.
Mm-hmm. You saw this answer from Tucson.
Yeah. I think we got the tie-in.
How's that?
That description Mrs. Lewis gave us of Dorothy Miller. The driver doesn't remember anyone like that on his bus. He remembered Mrs. Lewis, though. She didn't get on the bus at Dallas. She didn't sit next to a young girl with a baby either. Driver says he's sure of it.
Well, and what's the pitch?
Mrs. Lewis got on the bus at Tucson. She had a baby in her arms.
"8:35 a.m. Frank Smith and I continued to interview the bus driver, the same man who'd been driving the bus on which Mrs. Lewis and the abandoned baby and his mother supposedly had arrived in Los Angeles the day before. The more we talked to the driver, the more he convinced us that the story we'd gotten from Mrs. Marjorie Lewis was a long way from the truth. He repeated that he was absolutely sure that Mrs. Lewis did not get on the bus at Dallas, that she boarded the bus at Tucson, and at the time she got on, she was holding a baby in her arms. He was just as positive that Mrs. Lewis held the baby in her arms all the way into Los Angeles, and that she did not sit next to a young red-haired girl, but an elderly woman. He also told us that none of his passengers on that particular trip fitted the description of Dorothy Miller as given us by Mrs. Lewis. 8:50 a.m. Before the bus driver left, we got his address and a phone number where we could get in touch with him if necessary. 9:05 a.m. Frank and I got in the car, drove to the downtown hotel where Mrs. Lewis was staying. She told us that her husband, Army Captain Walter Lewis, had arrived in from overseas earlier that morning and checked in at the hotel, that he was downstairs in the hotel barber shop.
That's quite a parade they're having down there.
Yes, ma'am.
How's the baby? Are they taking care of him? Is he all right?
Yes, ma'am. We checked with the hospital. He's doing fine.
Oh, I'm glad. And the Miller girl, Dorothy Miller, did you find out anything?
We haven't been able to locate her. No trace of her at all. That's why we're here, Mrs. Lewis. There are a few things we'd like to have you straighten out for us.
Well, I'll be glad to do anything I can to help. I think I already told you everything I know about the girl.
We'll be honest with you, Ms. Lewis. We don't think you're telling us the truth.
What? I don't understand.
We talked to the man who was driving the bus she came in on yesterday, the same bus you say Dorothy Miller and her baby were on.
Yes, that's right.
Well, the bus driver couldn't remember the Miller girl, told us none of his passengers even came close to her description.
Well, there were quite a few people on the bus. I guess you can't blame him for not remembering her.
He remembered you, Mrs. Lewis. You were sitting near the front of the bus. He doesn't remember anyone with a baby sitting next to you, though.
I guess he made a mistake. He can't remember everything.
He said you were holding the baby.
I don't understand this. What is it you're trying to find out?
When we talked to you yesterday, you told us that you got on the bus at Dallas. Isn't that right?
Yes, what would that have to do with it?
Well, the bus driver says you got on at Tucson. He seemed to remember it pretty well. Says when you got on the bus, you were holding a baby in your arms.
Oh, that's silly. He's wrong. He must have me confused with somebody else.
I don't see how, ma'am. He says you were the only woman on the bus with a baby.
What's the point of this, Sergeant? I don't understand any of this.
Well, now, frankly, Ms. Lewis, neither do we. I don't know why you're lying to us about this, but apparently you are.
You're wrong. I'm not lying. It happened just the way I told you. The girl gave me the baby to hold, and then she disappeared. There's no reason for me to lie about that.
We found a receipt for a hospital bill in that valise with the baby's things in it. The receipt was made out to Dorothy Miller.
Well, that proves it, doesn't it? She was on the bus with me, and her baby was with her.
Check was made with the hospital at Tucson. They remembered the name Dorothy Miller. She gave birth to a baby boy about 7 weeks ago. She wasn't the same girl you described to us. Description wasn't even close.
Then it must be a mistake. I guess somebody made a mistake. I can't understand any of this.
They sent us back a description of the Dorothy Miller who stayed at the hospital. Fairly tall woman, short brown hair, about 29 or 30.
Yes?
Description fits you, Mrs. Lewis. Fits almost perfectly.
It's wrong. It has to be wrong. The whole thing's a mistake.
No, I don't think so, ma'am.
Why don't you tell me? What do you think? Tell me, please.
Well, there is no Dorothy Miller. There never was. There's no such person.
That's what you really think. I invented it? I made it all up?
Did you?
And the baby. What about him? If there's no Dorothy Miller, what about the baby?
I don't know. You want to tell us? Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lewis, anything we can do?
Thank you, I'm all right. I suppose I knew it would happen sometime. I tried not to think about it.
Yeah?
I knew you'd found out. That's why you asked if my husband was with me, isn't it? You didn't want to embarrass me.
I wanted to give you a chance to tell your side of the story. We thought maybe you wanted to keep it from your husband.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll tell him. He'll be back in a few minutes. He can do anything he wants, and I won't blame him. He'll pack his bag and walk out and leave, and I won't blame him. Nobody will blame him.
You want to tell us about it?
I think you know. It's my baby. My own baby, and I couldn't keep him. There wasn't anything else to do. Nothing. My own baby.
You made up the whole story about the girl, Dorothy Miller. Her leaving the baby with you. Mrs. Lewis?
Well, now, you must have had a reason for it, Mrs. Lewis. Giving your baby away. You want to tell us about it?
Won't make any difference. Done. It's all done. It's my husband I'm thinking about. Walter. I'm going to have to hurt him, and I don't want to hurt him. I don't know how I'm going to tell him.
Tell him what, ma'am?
I love him, Sergeant. I tried to explain. I didn't want to be alone. Having him away all the time, I knew there was going to be trouble. I knew it. I didn't want to be alone, and he didn't understand. He only said I was fooling.
Yes, ma'am.
He left for overseas in October, almost 2 years ago. I went down to Wilmington. I saw him leave on the boat. I stood there and watched him go. I wasn't going to see him. 24 months, I wouldn't see him. No children, no family, just a 2-room apartment. If he only believed me. If he only would have taken me with him.
Yes, ma'am.
I took it for a year. A whole year. A 2-room apartment, being alone. I wrote to Walter twice a week. It didn't do any good. He didn't want me with him a whole year. Not too much.
You mean you could have joined him overseas? He didn't want you to.
I don't know why. I kept writing to him, and he kept letting me off a whole year. Got too much a 2-room apartment alone. You can't spend your life that way. I started going out. Having dates. I had to get out. I started going to parties. Different people. I guess I drank too much. I didn't want to be alone. I guess I always drank too much.
Yes, ma'am.
There was one party. I don't even remember who I went with. I guess I was drinking. I don't know. And I left. I don't even remember who I was with. It didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to happen like this.
Are you all right, Mrs. Lewis? There's something we can get for you?
No, I'm all right. I didn't know what to do when I found out. I saw the doctor. He didn't understand it either. I mean, the way I felt. He said the baby would be born in June. I cried. He didn't understand.
Yes, ma'am.
When the time came, I went to Tucson, Arizona. They had my baby. At least I wasn't alone. I used a different name at the hospital. Dorothy Miller. Maybe it wasn't Walter's baby. But it was mine. It was mine. But at first it wouldn't make any difference. But it did, though, it did.
So you figured on giving up the baby, giving him away, is that it?
can't tell you how many times I worked it out in my mind, day after day. I almost went crazy with it. Walter, the baby, which Walter? I finally decided, Walter. Don't you think it's fair? Don't you?
Well, it's your decision, ma'am. It's going to have to be up to you.
I don't know how to tell him. Won't you help me, please? Help me tell Walter.
All right, if you like.
Such a terrible thing. When you make a choice. When you have to hurt someone. To have to choose between the two of them. One of them has to be hurt.
Ma'am?
My husband or my baby. Which one?
10:38 a.m. At Mrs. Lewis's request, Frank and I stayed on at the hotel room until her husband, Army Captain Walter Lewis, returned. He was a tall man in his late 30s, dark eyes, tan complexion. Mrs. Lewis was waiting in the adjoining room. It wasn't easy, but as best we could, Frank and I briefed the husband on what had happened. His first reaction was fairly normal. He took it pretty hard. We kept on talking to him. After a while, he calmed down. We laid out the whole story for him again.
Are you sure it was my wife?
Yes, sir.
She turned the baby over to the police, is that it? She gave the baby up?
Yes, sir. She figured it was the only thing she could do.
Kind of hard to figure, isn't it? What's the answer? What am I supposed to do?
Well, I know it's none of our business, Captain, but I think you might try looking at it from your wife's point of view.
What do you mean?
Well, it's pretty obvious she's still in love with you. I think she's shown you that.
Yeah.
Well, she was in a jam. It was a big choice for her to make. She knew she was wrong. She made a mistake. She was ready to pay for it. It was either you or the baby. She knew that. She decided to give up the baby.
Where's Marge now, my wife?
In the next room.
I want to see her.
Well, maybe if you'd wait just a little while.
No, it's all right. I just want to tell her something. Marge? Marge, come out here. I want to talk to you.
What can I say, Walter? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There isn't anything else I can say.
You don't have to say anything, Marge.
You can do what you want. I won't blame you. You've got a right to do anything. I just want to tell you, Walter, I love you and I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I won't blame you. Anything you do, I won't blame you.
It's going to be all right. Nothing to cry about here. Everything will be all right.
Walter.
Try and take it easy, dear. It was a mistake. I made my share of it. It'll all work out. Officer,
Yes, sir?
I'd like to ask a favor. We've got a car downstairs.
Yes, sir, we do.
I wonder if you'd mind dropping us by the hospital. I'd like to see my son.
On August 15th, a meeting was held in the District Attorney's Office, City and County of Los Angeles, State of California. In a moment, the results of that meeting. In the interests of justice, it was decided that no criminal complaint be filed against the suspect.